Hi, can you ping me now? In this video, we're going to talk about 3 different sets of ping tests run to 3 different websites from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I'm William DeBruin, and I'm going to be joined by Ernesto Diaz and Luca Racic, who you'll hear a little later on in the video. Our first test was to google.com, a website we all know and are familiar with. The next test was to usfca.edu, the homepage for the University of San Francisco. And the third test was to index.hr, a news website based in Croatia. Okay, let's get started. So our first ping test was to google.com. Here you can see the table of all of our trials and our averages. From the far left column, you can see that our trace route determined 13 hops from my local machine off campus to the Google homepage. In the far right column, you can see the averages for each hop. As you can see, we start off consistently low at around 10.4 millisecond ping, which increases and then plateaus from between 30 and 40 ping, with the ping to the final server being a little bit higher, an average of 43.8. As you can see here in the graphic representation, there's pretty significant noise throughout our tests. There's sort of not really any clear trends. We can see a general upward trend that we identified from a table in the previous slide. You can also note that the orange and green lines that correspond to 7:30 p.m. and 10:40 p.m. are also a little bit higher for across all of the ping tests. When we look at the packet loss for our ping tests, we see that it's pretty consistently low, usually dropping no more than 1 packet. Results in a 1.7% loss, up to 6.7% loss, which corresponds to 4 packets dropped out of 60. It is notable here, though, that for all of our tests to routers 10, 11, and 12, we had a 100% packet loss, which will be discussed a little bit later. Also, there is sort of no notable trends relating to time of day. We see sort of random packets dropped here or there, which is consistent with a very low loss rate. Dropping one or two packets here or there isn't notable. Our graphic representation shows sort of the same thing. We sort of have a little bit of noise around 0 that doesn't really relate to any trends for time of day, and then a spike between hops 10, 11, and 12 that all dropped 100% of the packets.
Our European website, we did index.hr, which is a media company in Croatia. As you can tell by the table presented here, most of our numbers were pretty consistent. The request timeout would always happen around from 5th to the 8th hop. And then after the request timeout, we can see that the numbers would spike up a little bit, but then they would stay consistent throughout the whole trace route. Also, the thing we looked at, we think the reason why these numbers were so consistent here is because of the time difference that is in Croatia and here. So it's a 6-hour time difference. So we can see the numbers are pretty low because people usually look at the news articles and stuff early morning or late afternoon. So that's why we see these big differences between the index.hr and the other 2 websites we did. For the graph representation of the index.hr website, you can see that the numbers are pretty tightly close together with no huge gaps between them. And there is the big gap between 5 and 9, which were the request timeouts. that were pretty consistent throughout the times, and it was always the hop between from 6 to 9. We can see that average, which is the light blue line, closely follows the data, except the 11:30 one. But as I said before, at 11:30, that would be 6:30 in the morning in Croatia. So we can see a like slight spike up because more people would be on the website at that given time. For the average packet loss for index.hr, my numbers were pretty consistent. So throughout the day, it would always be 0 from the first to fourth hop, and then from the same as from 9 to 11. The only difference is that at 11:30, we can see that there was 1% packet loss, but this average is still very small. It's only 0.2. Where we see 100% packet loss, at least from the request timeouts that we get when we tried pinging certain IP addresses, and we didn't get a response back. The graph version of this, you can see that, of course, all the numbers are pretty the same. So the line follows the time, like really, all the times are the same. So we only see one line showing here, except for the 1% at the 11th hop at 11:30. That's where you can see a little bump over there, but nonetheless, we can say that the packet loss is pretty consistent regarding to time and how many packets we do actually lose in the process.
We also ran our experiment to the University of San Francisco in California. And as you can see from the chart, there were 9 hops to get from the UNC PSK network to the server for University of San Francisco. The first couple of hops were pretty quickly. It was about 10 milliseconds, as you can tell in the first hop on average. But over time, as in throughout the day, the time got way longer. Which makes sense because at 8:45 a.m. here, that would be around 5 in the morning in California, so that explains the longer delays later in the afternoon. We also saw that for hops 7 and 8, there were 2 connections there that we were unable to receive any information for, and that could be very likely due to firewall or any other issues. So here is a graphical representation of the average response times. As you can see, at 8:45 a.m. and 11 a.m., the delay in milliseconds was considerably lower than the afternoon times and the night times. And as you can see, the average in the teal line is right there in the middle. And you can see from the graphs that the first couple hops had shorter delays than the later hops that were further from the origin. Now, in terms of packet loss, for the most part, it was 0% packet loss. There was nothing notable here. In hop number 5 at 11 a.m., there was a 1% drop in packets. But other than that, nothing notable here. And then obviously in hops 7 and 8, there was a complete 100% packet loss when we tried to run the ping on it. And here's a graphical representation of that. Again, nothing very notable. Pretty much it all occurred due to the firewall or some other issue that did not allow our computers to communicate with the routers on the way to the server. So some observations about the response time and the trace route. The ping delays tended to increase for the routers that were further from the origin router, and that was very clear from my specifically experiment on the University of San Francisco. So you can see the later routers had a longer delay. There were also big differences between the machines, even if they were pinging on the same network. So after the fact, we also ran an experiment to the same web server from all three of our machines, and despite them being on the same exact network, we were getting drastically different delays and response times. And we think that's possibly due to the fact that there are different network cards in each of the machines, and possibly some sort of priority system that the bandwidth for UNC's network could be providing. As also noted, the response time delays were considerably higher for the afternoon and the evening. There were differences that we didn't notice for the index.hr page, which we saw as possibly due to the time difference since that website is in Croatia. Interestingly, though, we expected that site to be busier during the morning and at night times because that is a news website, which is when people tend to look at their news. But we saw no notable difference in the times for those ping tests. Also, there were more hops to google.com than to index.hr or the University of San Francisco. And one of the issues, or one of the reasons we think that could have occurred is, first of all, the University of San Francisco in California does not host their own website. It's actually hosted by a third party, Pantheon.io. And when you first run the trace route for that, you see that it immediately says that it's tracing the route to Pantheon.io instead of the website name that you typed in, which it did show for both Google and index.hr. And Google.com also most likely routes to multiple different servers depending on the location, so that could be a reason why there were more hops to Google.com than the other two.
So it's also important to note that we got different results when we collected data in different ways. On the right, we see a table of ping data from the 13 IP addresses in the Google trace route. All of this ping data was collected by Python scripts that utilized the Python OS module, which allows a Python script to make essentially a terminal call. The column on the far right shows data that was collected when the Python script was running each call sequentially. So after each OS call returned, then the Python script would make a ping call for the next IP address in the list. The column on the left, however, was collected by a Python script that ran each ping call in a separate process, which so all of the processes were running in parallel. So obviously, as you can see from the table, the Python script that implemented the multiprocessing module took about 4 times longer to complete than the Python script that ran each call sequentially. We're not really sure why this happened. It's possible that my computer experienced a sudden decrease in internet speed, though this seems unlikely given the sort of time, the locality of the times of each call. As we can see from the column on the left, the multiprocessing script executed first, and it was started at 8:45 a.m. and it was finished running before 8:46 a.m. The Python script that didn't utilize the multiprocessing library was started after that at 8:47 a.m. and it took a few minutes to complete, and it completed just before 9 a.m. So obviously it's possible that, at 8:46 a.m. My Wi-Fi speed got a lot better, though this seems unlikely given that we don't really see any spikes between 8:47 a.m. and 8:59 a.m. It's also possible that the multiprocessing was a factor in the decrease in ping time, or rather increase in ping time. It's possible that the OS descheduled some of those processes while they were running, which may have resulted in outbound processing or queuing delays, though this also seems unlikely, given that there were only ever 13 packets going outbound at a time, and because 3 of the the IP addresses never responded, only 10 packets ever were coming inbound at a time. It's also important to note that when these two scripts were run at different times, so in the afternoon and evening, there wasn't really a significant difference in the results. So it seems like other factors are at play here, but we're not really sure why. For the purposes of this video, all the other data that you see collected from Google.com and the 13 routers in the trace route, all that data was collected using the non-multiprocessing script.
Our packet loss observations, you can see the packet loss is consistently either very low or constantly high, and it's constantly high only when we have request timeout, which is most likely due to the firewall blocking the pings. So the ping goes through, but all the packets are dropped when it reaches that particular server. It always seems to happen in a sequence, so once it starts, we can see a big gap of like pings where it will just constantly be request timeout until it finally picks it up again. It's always close to the end of the a run, so it's never at the beginning. It's always either at the middle or almost at the end. We also did try to changing the timeout to double. So regularly we only do it for we ping a certain server for 4 seconds, and if at 4 seconds it doesn't respond, the ping actually turns back request timeout. So we did we tried to prolong it. So we did something called a prolonged ping, where we changed the timeout to 8,000 milliseconds or 8 seconds, as well as 16, but still with no luck, it would always return the same request timeout for each of our websites.
Okay, that's all from us. We hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.